live, but we might not be.
We'll find out.
Yeah, refresh
very
the page.
soon.
So we got Doug over at the helm, taking care of Doug things for us. And it's freaking me out watching Doug work here. We've kind of like changed up our whole setup. And you're hearing way too much of us. Go to the other page, Doug, so you can see what's going on.
So anyway, we're gonna talk about one of the pillars of Dungeons and Dragons. We did a poll over on the Twitters, and
or we could talk about all 3 pillars of Dungeons and Dragons.
I figure maybe we'll break it up.
So I don't know if there's enough for each one. Maybe there is. I don't know. But we did do a poll, so we should probably start with like the results of the poll.
You got the numbers.
I do have the numbers. So we just asked people what their favorite pillar was: combat, exploration, and social. And surprisingly, at the bottom was combat. Combat clearly lost with a 29%. Exploration, we have a 32%, and social, we had a 39%.
So I mean, all told, that's pretty close. I mean, 29 and 32 are right just about at that middle mark, or third mark.
Social is like a clear winner, like a whopping 10%.
10% over, but the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's still pretty cool. It happens to be my favorite pillar. I enjoy role playing. I enjoy just getting into the character and talking to the varied NPCs and PCs that you're gaming with.
It's funny too, because we were having a conversation in one of our video planning sessions that we do, and we were talking about this a little bit, and then later on someone asked like, what is exploration? Is that even a thing? and it's probably the least touched on pillar in D&D, especially 5e.
I would agree. You have very few spells that tend to get into that aspect of it, and if you've got a world that you already know, the deities, you already know the landscape, it's a lot harder to get into, the nooks and crannies of those exploration or of the exploration pillar. But it can be a lot of fun when you get into discovery, when you can find new things.
Well, I mean, really, even if you're doing dungeon delves and dungeon crawl, anything that isn't a combat in those scenarios are generally exploration.
Yeah.
Whether you're overcoming traps and riddles and puzzles and things like that, I would consider that stuff more exploration than any of the other pillars.
No, I would agree.
I dig that aspect of exploration, the discovery as well as the possible danger.
So, what is it? You say you prefer social, Ted, so you're like falling there with the 39%ers. What is it about that draws you in?
Well, during role-playing, that's where you're going to, have the conversations that lead to everything else. That's where you get into the real nuts and bolts, for me, of the game. Whether it be interaction with the other players so that you're discovering, their stories and find out why they want to do things, whether you're role-playing and trying to overcome a role-playing obstacle, whether it's, the political intrigue, getting into a mostly role-playing game, it's a lot of fun, and there's times that the dice can help you, and the times the dice can hurt you. And, as my experience of a gamer grows, I realize that when a DM calls for a roll, how can I adjust what I've said or how I've said it to match the roll? Because clearly, if I rolled poorly, something didn't come out right.
Well, in that case, like my brother always said, and I kind of agree with him a little bit, is if you're going to do stuff like that and your GM isn't a GM that is adjusting what the DCs for how well you role play, then you should roll first and role play later, right? To know how to role play the situation. Let the dice. If you're going to rely on the dice, then rely on the dice for the whole scenario.
So, like in Nerdarchy passed, I was playing a Thrycreen and I threatened to eat someone's children, I had to, do a intimidation roll or whatever it was, and I didn't have a high charisma. I wound up like totaling it was like a 4 on the die, so I failed. So I was like, well, looking back at those things, it's like, well, maybe I meant to say, I will eat your children, but like,
what I actually said is, I'm on my way to eat your children.
like maybe I just screamed or I got things out of context because common isn't my native language. Like you can bend and twist those kind of things around, and yes, the die roll could really benefit from coming first in those scenarios.
You really said, if you're eaten, I'll take care of your children. And they go, oh, well, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I like this guy. He's all right.
I'm not scared of this thing at all.
Or you're like, I don't want to take care of his. I don't want him taking care of my children. He does kind of, drool poison.
Yeah, just parallel. They'll have poison resistance by the time they get old. It'll be great.
Oh, well, I guess
extreme training.
That's great for when the kids are teething. The Thrycreen poison, just rub it on the gums. They won't feel a thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that actually works, though. Nerdarchy does not advocate using Thrycreen poison for medicinal purposes with your children.
For recreational purposes, whatever.
But, actually social engagement and social encounters in the game can also be exploration as well. Like you mentioned, political intrigue. I actually think that leans more heavily on exploration than it does role-playing. Like if you're trying to ferret out clues and figure out, who the players are in the political game, and there's probably a particular problem you're trying to solve, I think a lot of that is going to be exploration and fact-finding. It just changes it. Like, instead of lurking through dark forests, you might be lurking through, offices of bureaucrats, a desk or libraries trying to discern information.
And I wholeheartedly agree there. I think, I enjoy all the pillars, but combat is my least favorite. I've grown away from, combat. You guys clearly remember, how bloodthirsty I was, how melee-centric most of my characters were in the past.
Has to do the most damage.
Yeah, that's where I started, and it took me a long time to evolve away from that. And now, I rarely play melee-based characters.
Well, I think so. Now we still want things to happen in the game,
right?
Like, you want drama and tension. But now, as we mature, we've kind of realized it doesn't have to come from just fighting things and there being physical conflict in the game.
You can have drama and tension in all 3 pillars, and I'm actually working on some workshopping some ideas as possible video topics for that particular mindset.
Yeah, we were just talking about that while we were getting lunch, and I keep wondering, is there any food in my beard? So we've switched things up. We moved away from using our DSL camera because I know you guys get that choppy frame rate that we were getting before because we were running it through way too much software probably. So hopefully this is better for you guys. It's smoother. I know the picture is probably not quite as good. I don't know how noticeable it is. I know before with the other one, even with the choppy frame rates, like I would go to hold something up and be like, why am I holding this up? And then I look at the video later and go, oh, you can really see that. With this one, we might be back to, I don't know why I'm holding this up.
But choppy frame rates.
Annoying.
Lamer, I think.
It is lamer. So hopefully this will alleviate that. Hopefully we don't degrade the quality too much. So what about you, Nate? Where would you fall in on our Twitter poll?
I dig the exploration, I think, the most, and that's because you can have a lot of danger, and there's that sense of tension. You can create all that, like you were saying, in the social situations where it can be kind of like combative or like dungeon delving, and that exploration, I think you can take that over to any part. If it's in a city and in a dealing with a conversation as well as dealing with a dungeon, so.
I feel like exploration is the least explored pillar in D&D, but at the same time I also feel it's the most versatile. Right? There isn't any situation in the game where exploration can't happen. Anytime the players are coming across things that are unknown to them and their characters, it's exploration essentially. And it can be married with the other two pillars. I feel like the easiest. So it's the most, in my opinion, the most versatile.
Combat in a new place, unfamiliar terrain or unfamiliar setting winds up creating a hazard within the combat itself. So there's exploration happening during the combat. Same thing could be said of, well, while you're going to role play, there is, the backdrop, the setting. So, you happen to be at, this party. Well, as you're mingling, there's things happening in the background that you have to either acknowledge, accept, interact with, or ignore. That's going to fall into that exploration. So I think that it happens in most games without people acknowledging what's there, because it's just the backdrop, and sometimes they interact with it, sometimes not.
Yeah, and you can marry the other pillars together, but they don't pardon me. They don't integrate as smoothly. Right? The party example. Well, once you enter in with combat as well, now the social part is pretty much ended, right? It's hard to go back to the party after swords have been drawn, arrows are being fired, and maybe you blew up part of the room with a fireball. At that point. But you can still engage people and be social with with exploring at the same time, and vice versa. Also, like the combat aspect as well. If you have a combat where you have to do other things while fighting, there's a task that needs to be accomplished. Maybe you don't even know how to do the task. Like it's a puzzle, but this puzzle has to be solved because the combat isn't going to end if you don't. Or there's a time limit, so you don't have enough time to just stop, deal with the combat, then handle the puzzle. You have to do everything at the same time. So that that's just a quick example of how you could integrate those two very easily.
And you've done that in your games before.
Yeah, I did the puzzle. It was like a goat puzzle or something.
But you also
that I changed.
but you also, in the Scarlet Sisterhood, there was like a ceremony that the one person was interacting with while the others were engaging in combat. So
yes,
there was exploration and combat going on at the same time because you couldn't just do one. They were integrated.
Got some great questions coming up in the chat. If you
Go for it. Oh, go for it.
All right, from Ed Grafe, he says, how would you get true newbies to start exploring the other pillars outside of just combat?
You have to lead by example. You have to show them that it's there. And, part of it is just, as the DM, just peeling back little pieces so that they want more and that encourages them to do it. If you info dump on them or give them too much at a time, they might ignore it. But if you give them just enough to make them want more, I think you're going to have more success.
As Dave said earlier, drama and tension is something that's, really important to the story and for the interaction. So if you create tension within exploration, then all right, well, I need to know what happens. The way you phrase and the area that they're in, if you've got their interest piqued, then it's going to work out well. When it comes to the role-playing pillar, asking informative questions, like things where the NPCs want to know about the player characters, that's a way to engage them because, to some level, player characters are more inclined to talk about themselves than about anything else. And this is, from my own background as well. So that's the way to start getting them to role play in character and revealing information. And as they reveal, what their goals might be, what their interests are, you then have the ability to take notes and use that later to get more things linked to those characters and their goals.
The simplest way to get them to explore something is create a need for an object or a thing, a MacGuffin, right? Any MacGuffin will do, and put it somewhere they haven't been, right? So, or you could put it possibly several places they haven't been, and they have a choice, and they then have to choose. That's the other thing, is make sure they have definitive choices, but not unlimited choices.
Do you want to go to the swamp or do you want to go to the desert? Both are equally bad, but you have the choice of which one you want to go to.
Right, this flower only grows specifically in the moonlight of this desert or this swamp. Which one do you want to go to try and get it, if you want to get it at all?
Right.
Do you think describing stuff plays a role in exploration?
Yes.
Like how you describe and layer your descriptions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also too, if you describe, maybe go light on your descriptions so that they want more information and they ask for you to elaborate.
Yeah, the less you describe in the room, that they have to ask, and then they have to ask questions about, well, is this there? Or it's like, oh, there's a table and some stuff on it. And they're like, oh, what's on the table? I'm like, okay, if they want to know, then you can start, exploring what could be on the table. Or if they're looking for something to use in the room, because maybe there's something going on outside and they need a particular object, or they just want something heavy to throw against the door. That kind of stuff can be put into a room that's not full already. Like if you described every four corners and everything that's in the room, it's hard for them to think, oh, maybe he just left this off of the description. This might be in the room. But if you lightly describe a room, they're more likely to suggest, well, is this in there or is that in there?
And that's a great way to, again, go back to that, using what the players or characters are providing. Because if they ask for something and they want it, did we just lose connection?
Yeah, I didn't even hit a button. It just went off.
Yeah, I'm spinning it as well.
This is
What?
It still says offline now. There we go.
And we're back.
Apologies about that. So as I was saying, if you're using what the players are giving you, Nate talked about, that if he's describing the room and the players want more and they ask, is something there? Well, then they're already thinking, well, is there a barrel there? Oh, sure there is. Well, what's in it? All right. Well, now they're piqued. Their interests are up. You have the ability to then further dive into that.
I just like the way our immersion in the video was broken.
There's a lot of great questions coming up here. So here's another one from Zaref Gaming. Is there a way for a more experienced player to get better at role-playing?
Yes,
keep at
role
it.
play. Keep doing it. Keep practicing. Like I because I'm doing a lot more stream games, I'm trying to do more voices for characters, and I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible at accents, but I just keep trying to do it, and I try and focus on the areas where I feel like I'm doing well, and gloss over the areas where I'm not doing so great, and I just keep practicing. It is really weird because I'm like walking through my house trying out different accents, and my family's looking at me funny, and they're like, "Why are you looking at videos on how to speak like someone from New Jersey? You are from New Jersey." But I'm like, but I want to speak from Jersey better.
Well, I mean,
The shower is a great place to practice.
And your car when you're driving.
Well, then, then you look weird to the people around you. As long as you don't care about that skill.
Oh, I never care about that.
We know, Ted. We know.
Like the thing with voices. I mean, even the professionals sometimes get it wrong. I was watching an episode of Critical Role, and the one person was Laura. She got so excited or upset about something, she went completely out of her character voice and was using Laura's natural voice.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, you went right out of dialogue there.
So, well, the other thing too, like if you're talking about role playing, like as a character, and you're not good at voices and you don't want to try voices, then you can work on characterizations. And so, like, think about that character, some things that are important to them, and like, what is the lens they're going to view the world through, and try and impart that into your role playing, instead of the voices, because voices, one, is a combination of skill and talent, right? Skills we can learn and we can hone. Talents are kind of things that we're just born with and you're just naturally good at. And when you're talking about like voices and voice acting, that requires multiple components. That requires your brain to your vocal cords and tongue to work a certain way, as well as your hearing. How you take in that information as well.
Well, you can skip voices and go to mannerisms or the way you speak. Well, suppose you want to, go with a more, southern, and you're not getting the accent, but you're going to talk a little bit slower. You're just going to be mellow. You're just going to go whatever. Or you could be like, all right, well, this is someone who's very excited, and they're going to talk really fast, and they're going to be right in the moment. So
take sharp breaths.
Maybe they're leaning forward while they talk. And if you get into these, you might always be using your particular voice, but if the way you speak is different, that's going to come across as a voice.
And you might pardon me, sorry about that. And you might do things like look for certain words. Oh, thanks. You might look for certain words that you use a lot, like you said. Like instead of trying a southern accent, you just might say y'all a lot or something. Or if you're trying to affect a Canadian accent, but you're not good at Canadians, you just must say "a" at the end of every word. Every sentence. There's different things you can do.
Along those same lines, it could be the words that you're saying. Well, if you want to be a wizard, you could try to sound more intelligent. Let me use long sounding words. Let me be overly dramatic about my word choices just so that I can be, hoity toity and better than you. Whereas if you're going to be, Grog the Barbarian, well, maybe anything more than 3 syllables is just beyond your capacity.
Do you guys think players engaging with their fellow players helps you role playing, like speaking to them instead
Absolutely.
of just acting in a vacuum?
I would also say helping the GM set the scene. So when they say, well, there's time for taking a long rest, he might not ask you what you want to do, but you say, oh, well, then Garden, he sits down and he starts taking out something and weaving something, or he starts whittling or whatever the purpose is, and maybe another character is interested in knowing what that's about, or maybe they already know what it's about, but people are like, oh, that's something he would do. And that's something he does every break that he gets, or someone might always be reading a tome or a book or something like that. That's just something they naturally do. And maybe one of the ways to interact with another character, if you're one that always reads a book, is trying to get the other ones interested in what you're reading and be like, hey, guess what I just read?
When a player character engages in role playing, whether it be, well, I'm just going to do this, and they're always talking about it to try and get the other players involved, or if a player sees that going on and wants to get interest, those are great tools for the GM. As a veteran GM to some degree, when I can sit and take a break and allow the players to interact in and amongst themselves, to me, that's going to tell me what they want. I'm going to be informed by those decisions. Oh, they want to interact with each other. Well, maybe they're going to reveal background information that I might not have. Maybe 2 characters are going to have a bond that I can either use or exploit in the storyline later. Each time things like that happen, you've got a lot of tools that are just being presented to you that you might be, not aware of or ignoring, that are there.
Here's a pillar question I pulled out for you related to the thing. How long into your DMing games did you find a balance between combat and role-playing, which I'm assuming they mean social, because the whole thing is role-playing. Did you do one more heavily than the other?
It's a constant, change and flow. I've brought this up before, but I used to require, far more combats in my sessions, and it wasn't until after I started Nerdarchy and I went to a game in a comic book shop that, Scott Garibay was running, and it was a 4-hour session. We're locked in. We have to be done by 6 o'clock. And at 10 minutes to, he quick shoved in a round and a half of combat. We just role played the entire time, and I'm like, this was a great session. I don't need to have combat after combat to entertain and have a great time. And it totally changed the mindset of myself, and that's been in the last 4 years. So, how about you guys?
I feel like we probably had non-combat sessions before that.
Well, we did. But
you hated them.
It's not that I hated them. I hadn't grown as a player where it was I was there to fight stuff as a player.
Yeah, in the early days, there was a lot of combats because there was a lot of dungeon crawl. Like, you got out your graph paper, you were drawing maps, and...
Kit Kats as well as...
Yeah, you were going to fill... Yeah, you drew rooms, you got to fill them with something, probably monsters. Sometimes it made sense, sometimes it didn't, you know. Sometimes there was just a choker living in the hole above the crack in the wall for no reason. Just because, you know, no one had cleared them out or whatever. And, you know, or it's an abandoned gnome fortress or something. I feel like that's most of our games in the early days. You know, it's like there is this mine that's been taking over, or the miners haven't come back to town. Go figure it out.
There was exploration, there was combat, but I believe like the social end of it was definitely the lower. I don't feel that there was a huge amount of inter-party role-playing and conversation that happened, and it was just a slow evolution that brought combat down. And like, I know you ran a game once when I was playing Tull, and you didn't want any combat there that night, and I was so bloodthirsty. I was willing to swing my sword at anything and everything that showed its path. And I can recall each of the encounters, and you were like, nope, doesn't work. And I was just getting more and more frustrated as a player because I wanted to, as friends of ours said, I want to kill shit.
All right, put your sage advice hat on. Here's a rules question. Can a sorcerer twin the spell mirror image on themselves?
No, because twin requires you to target. The spell has to target one creature, and I believe mirror image, it doesn't target a creature; it's a self.
Yeah.
So that's not yourself, is not considered.
No. Now, if you can target a creature, you can choose yourself to be a creature. Right. But if it just says self is the target.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one right up your guys' alley. When you're running a module, how would you change it up when you have a few players that have played or read it? I'm kidding, because I know you don't.
Because I know that's not up your alley.
Well, is that a question?
Yes.
It
was a question.
Honestly, change the most important details. If they're supposed to be fighting,
Strahd is now a woman.
If
there you go. Everything else can stay the same.
If it's supposed to be a forest, change it to a swamp. Change the major NPCs. I mean, literally, if it's supposed to be hobgoblins, replace it with orcs. Visually, everything is different. But if you're not using the same details as you describe it, the players aren't even going to realize that they're playing the same scenario.
Yeah, I did. Currently, with one of the games I'm playing, we're doing the Sunless Citadel, and I changed the apple to a mushroom, so it's like more like a fungal theme to a lot of the stuff. And I changed the name of the town that you interact with everybody in, and including like little details, like if there's a sign and it describes where the place is going, I was just like, okay, this sign has like a red circle with some dots on it. So rather than whatever. I don't even know the real name of the place in the actual module because I changed it so many months ago when I started playing it. So just like little details, any major people change their name, maybe change their class if it's not required. Obviously, if you need a summoner, then you need the summoner, or you could say they have a book instead. But changing those kind of little details, changing the description up. Again, like Ted said, change it to like a swamp or something if it was a forest.
Yeah, if you've got the Mines of Phandelver and you want to run it again, well, if you don't run it as a mine shaft and you change the monsters even in name only and their description, like the party might not even be aware that they're playing the same scenario that they've already done 3 weeks ago.
They're the blue brand ruffians.
I would also look at the characters in the game and see if there's elements from their backstories or anything about those characters that I could then insert into the prepared adventure, and so this way personalize it towards them a little bit. And
that's a good trick, I think, because they're not going to consider, oh well, we're running a module but it's got all this personal stuff in it, so I would think that would distract them away from what's actually inherent to the module and what they kind of had set in for them.
And that's always a strong advice, that if you can personalize the story to the characters that are playing it, it makes the investment on their part that much stronger. And it's like, oh, well, do I have to go rescue some woman, or do I have to go rescue my mother? Well, most people are going to choose to rescue the family as opposed to just a random townsfolk. So insert however you want, but having those personal ties is always a strong choice.
Here's one from Jay Davis. Do you think 5e promotes any pillar over the others? Is this why optimizing videos get the most views?
Absolutely. If you look at all of the books, most of them just are comprised of ways to fight, right? So it's really easy for us as gamers to go, oh, this game is about fighting. Because when 80% of the rules that are written for it pertain to combat, sure. So maybe in future editions they'll do a better job of incorporating role-playing, social interactions, as well as exploration into the game.
I don't want social hit points. So I'm gonna say yes, there's a lot of combat rules, but that's because that I feel that needs the most rules for what they want to do with the game. So you've got exploration. You can do skill checks and things like that while you're doing exploration and have hazards and things, but at the same time, you don't need to have that be what's the main point of the exploration part. Same with social interactions. Like, there's not XP rewards for social encounters, but there could be. I mean,
there used to be.
There could be a rule written in that, or you could just award XP. I mean, doing XP not on the monsters, but based on gaining a level every X amount of games, rather than doling out individual XP. And I give XP for social encounters, so. But I don't even know if that's a part of the rules, and it was kind of irrelevant to me for 5th what it was, but I don't know if it is.
See, 3rd edition, like, your NPCs had CR, so you could extrapolate that a number to give them XP for successfully completing the social interaction, as well as traps and hazards also had ratings, so you could reward them for it. So it did reward the other pillars for it, and I agree. Like, you don't want social hit points, but they could spend more time talking about role playing and social interactions and encounters in the game to help GMs who might find these concepts harder or too foreign or too new to them.
So now we've talked many times about how we tend to homebrew and not run the pre-planned material. And yes, when you look at the books, they're full of resources that describe a mechanical aspect. When I run the RPG Crate games, the way his material is presented, there are times where it's like, this is information that's for the GM, and I'm just going to describe it to you. But then there's the dialogue boxes that's like, all right, this is what you're going to read, and this is what you're going to say. And it definitely speaks to the interaction pillar and gives me, this is what I say, to expound upon that one. I imagine in the modules and stuff that's there, the NPCs, especially in Curse of Strahd, that there's going to be role-playing information for how to specifically play those NPCs. Again, I don't read them. I gloss over and steal the components that I want. But when it comes to all of the books on the gaming shelf behind Dave, 90% of what's there, to me, speaks to the combat pillar. And it's on us as creative GMs and players to expound upon the other two.
So it's almost like now with like modern gaming, we have another component to the game, which I think is going to help with this more than anything that could probably be written in the rules, and that is probably like stream games, and when people get to see how players and GMs are interacting at different tables, that's a great place to see, how it can be done, for your players, if they're watching other people do it, especially people that are doing it at a high level, like Critical Role, folks on Hyper RPG, people that are experienced in gaming for a long time.
And I think that's a more valuable asset than a couple pages of back and forth dialogue amongst GM and player. I mean, that's good if you've never experienced before to see that kind of format. But besides that, I mean, how many pages of that would you require before you have explained it well enough to go along with the combat section? And, I guess that's the thing is like, you can just kind of take all that and leave it aside. Just explain, well, this is what we do with role playing, and then, oh, by the way, here's how the combat system works.
Yeah, I mean, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, what's live video worth, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So just seeing a role playing.
Well, what's the frame rate?
Well, that depends. So just seeing a role playing.
Come on.
exchange between Sam Riegel and Mercer Ray is going to be way more valuable than, like you said, reading the rules or how you could do it.
Here's a question from Andrew Lon. What would you recommend for a party that's never played before? A medic or a fighter to help the players? And he clarified, I mean, like what NPC, like if any, should he send along?
I mean, without really knowing what they've built, my go-to reaction would be like a non-combat medic, someone to help them, so that they can succeed and be able to put them back together. Putting a fighter in, that becomes an iffy situation. Is the fighter going to, steal the spotlight? That's my worry and fear.
My answer is neither.
Yeah, I know you.
I'm like, you don't need it. Like, make it till the next day. You get all your hit points back. 5e is of all the editions of Dungeons and Dragons is the one you least need to help your players with for getting hit points back or doing anything. Here's a better idea. Write adventures for those characters that you do have, not for that character you don't have. Then you don't even have to worry about the NPC.
We, last weekend we were supposed to play Dave's game. Sadly, not everybody was able to make it. And we decided, well, we were just going to do a one-shot. And, based on the particulars, we wound up making a all-martial, all-dragonborn party. No healing whatsoever amongst us. It was crazy. And, we had a great time. Yeah, I probably would have died without the healing potion that Mark's character had. But, it was good.
It's part of the fun. Now, so I would say if they're all new players and you want to have an NPC that's kind of mentor / whatever, then I would pick actually like a College of Valor bard or something like that. Someone who could technically fight. So if the players need prompting, like, yeah, this is where like the fighter guys types should probably run forward and attack this thing because otherwise we're all going to die. Like, so that guy can go and start attacking it, and everyone else that's supposed to be doing that goes, oh yeah, this is what we're supposed to be doing. So if they've never been in combat before, like someone that can lead them through that, the Bard of Valor also casts spells. The Bard of Valor also can give them boosts and things to different stuff, and also might have some knowledges that the party doesn't have, or has examples of having those knowledges, so that you can say, well, such and such Gerald is going to, investigate this room or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I have that skill as well. I should probably also investigate. So basically, like an example of what a character could be doing going through the game,
what they could be or should be doing.
And then they can figure out as time goes on what they as their characters would like to be doing. But you'd have like an all around kind of prompt in the game.
I like the idea of the bard because then it can inspire and make the players be able to do something better. Or, oh man, I failed to save, but I've got inspiration. All right, I can try again. So like that adds to the excitement of the player. I would just, oh well, the bard, it's gonna take the help action. It's not gonna do anything, to steal the spotlight. It's gonna make the spotlight shine on particular players. That's a good example, Nate.
I totally disagree. It should be a College of Lore bard, and he should just tell your mama jokes with his cutting words against the players.
It's like, what? This is how my master encouraged me.
This is how I learned.
Yeah, this is how I learned. Getting browbeat with words.
Got a cutting word to the players. Wow.
That'll teach them to ask for an NPC.
I don't think they were asking. I think the GM was asking what to include. And also, bards have cure wounds, don't they?
They do.
There you go. I've never
And
used
the
it as a
most
bard,
broken
but-
spell in the game, Healing Word.
And it could be.
I thought
chronicling.
the most broken spell was Healing Spirit.
That's a different level of broke.
And it could be It could be with the party to like chronicle their adventures.
Oh yeah, or tell them stories about the region. So
Yeah.
you could also info dump without info dumping on them. It's like
Throw-
better than Gandalf. That's what I would call this guy.
Yeah.
See, the
Flag Mag?
suggestion that Deadpool is the NPC.
I don't think I'd want to put Deadpool in the party. I don't think it would go well.
He's too OP.
Any other questions there, Doug?
Yeah, no.
So if you guys,
All right, we're
guys,
done.
if you guys and gals out there have any questions, feel free to throw them up in the chat. Put Nerdarchy in there so that we know that you're.
What is this
looking
green
at us.
thing?
So in the description below, there is the links to the RPG-related Kickstarters. Hobgoblin 3D has a Townscape Kickstarter that they're running. So here is a example of what some of these things look like. If you want 3D printed maps that are for your general map, this is great. It's not for putting minis on because like minis bigger than houses. But they sent this to us to be able to show off as an example. Kickstarter is live. It's down below.
There you go.
I don't know. I think it works great with this purple worm. That's blue. This blue
Yeah,
worm.
that's a good size.
Kaiju worm.
That would be great.
Yeah, that's a good. That's
Worm
good
is like,
for
F this
everybody.
building, F this fence, F this tree.
So if you want to check it out, please head down to the description below. Links to the Kickstarters. You can go check it out.
Also, one of the channel sponsors for Nerdarchy is Frog God Games, and we backed their Kickstarter for Rapping a Thuck, and we got a. You could
You
stop
can
bullets
rap it a
with this
thuck
thing.
somebody with that.
Yeah, this thing is huge.
The 500 some odd pages.
Oh man, it is a lot of pages.
While he's looking that up,
651. I'm
there
saying.
you go. We've also got the Tomb of Horrors. Tome of Horrors.
Tome.
Tome of Horrors.
Tome of Horrors.
You wouldn't want to be buried in that.
325 fantastical foes for 5th edition.
We actually have a flip through of this one coming up in the near future.
Absolutely. Lots of really great stuff. We've already been diagnosing and talking about some of the cool things that are in that book. You got, as you would expect, new demons, new dragons, new elementals, new genies,
New
new
elemental
undead.
dragons.
Lizards, frogs, toads.
And if you want the
They're on
stats,
brand.
if you want the stats for the frog god itself, the saga, it's there. It's a challenge 35. Go kill your party with it.
And also too, like to speak to the customer service, our copies came in a little dinged and banged up from shipping. So I've reached out to them, and we don't have to send them nothing. Just took some pictures, and they're going to send us new copies to replace the ones that are damaged. So we'll actually have we'll get new copies, and we'll probably, I don't know, you guys will probably see them again. They might end up in a giveaway or a contest or something. For sure. Doug, they're asking you questions.
I know, I see that.
You're famous. You're internet famous.
He is Nerder Doug.
One person that was their favorite game.
I think it was more than one person.
I know.
I've seen that comment come up. And,
In Just Quest.
yeah.
Hey, it was the best cooking show themed RPG that I've seen
At the time.
at the time.
As the more have come since then, but I
It's
think it was
still-
the first one.
It's still the best.
It's still the best.
It has lineage now.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a great group of players, and some crazy hijinks
And they
ensued.
They
For
got
sure.
they got to use some of our Nerdarchy's revised stuff with the hit dice, the
Oh,
heroics.
yeah, that was fun using those.
Yeah, I use those all the time in my home game. They're very fun.
So
Here's a question. So just a rules question, if you want, real quick, from Daddy Snowden. Would you allow a player that is using the levitate spell to let their familiar push them around?
Depends upon what their familiar is.
yeah, and how they're implementing the pushing.
Let's say it's a flying creature and they're just kind of like
If it's an owl with a low strength score, it's like you best muster some oomph to get it moving. You don't become
Maybe strength checks for the owl, but the owl's like a 2 strength. So
yeah. So
or not
or
easily.
You have a hover speed of 5.
Are you weightless when you're levitating?
I don't think. I think the
it's
magic
more
just
of an,
propels
like
you
an
up.
up or down kind of thing, specifically so that it's not like flying.
It's not 0G, you know.
Yeah.
Familiar could be like that guy on Showtime at the Apollo that comes out with the broom and just sweeps you away.
Yeah,
I would
so-
allow him to push you around if it's a swobold familiar.
I don't think you can get a swobold as a familiar though.
Damn it! This game sucks. I'm out.
If it's not faster than 5 feet per round, then I would allow it just cause.
Yeah, well, that's really, you look at the rules for dragging, right? And whatever they are, I would go by that. It's like, I don't know what it is, like times 90 your strength or something, you can drag it. So that would be a good place to look for those rules. And then then determine how fast I can drag it. Like it probably won't be full speed, maybe half speed or something. So in theory, it's kind of doable.
But it's not within. I would say not within the rules technically.
No.
For what levitate's supposed to do, but I don't see a big advantage to getting pushed 5 feet around personally. So
Also kind of going along with the pillars, Critical Hit Publishing. They over on Drive Through RPG, I believe. You can also get their stuff print on demand. I think we actually have a bunch of their books here as well, unless we've given them away already.
You're talking about the different location and places.
Yeah, cinematic environments.
That's
I believe
That's
is
it.
what it's called.
Yeah, we have 2 full sets.
Yeah, so they do like a breakdown of, the different environments and different hazards, and they have different ways that they kind of deal with it. So if you wanted to look at the exploration pillar, that would be a great place to go. I know Doug really loves Hellscapes
Yes.
from
Scrivened LLC is the publishing company.
yeah, so that they also offer up a lot of different things in there as well.
And
So-
DBJ has a Third Pillar Thursdays on his YouTube channel too.
Yes. Yeah, he's got a YouTube channel where he puts up videos. I think he puts them up pretty often too.
Yeah,
they're
Thursdays.
really long though.
Thursday's the exploration. It's called
Yeah.
Third Pillar Thursday.
Where they cover different things. The survival book.
Well, that was the one that was on top. for
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because DBJ really likes the environment stuff and the exploration pillar, but then Alex, who he actually does our thumbnails for us, he's a homesteader.
oh yeah,
Right? Yeah,
Wow.
he's a homesteader and lives in a yurt. So yeah, so he like sometimes I think sometimes we get too realistic with the stuff that we do and the information that we give, because it's like I think something along the lines like you could literally use this book to survive with, although Nerdarchy does not know for sure. Nor are we responsible if you try to survive off this book and die?
My wilderness survival skills have not been tested in a long time.
All right, Ted, take this book, head into the wilderness. See you next month.
we should
Let
do
us know
that.
how it works.
That'd be a cool vacation.
We're gonna need someone to chronicle it. Totally like Witch Blair style.
but the intern moved away.
No, it's
Curses.
just Dave showing up every day with a hot coffee, just like with orange tape around him. That you can't enter this space. Can't break. No immersion
It'll be
break.
terrible. I'll be like eating bacon. And,
Yeah. Like it's time to get our squirrel bacon, Ted.
Squirrel bacon.
You gotta kill a lot of squirrels for squirrel bacon.
Here's a good question, a pillar question if you want. You may
Sure.
have kind of covered it, but from Alan Jackson, who I'm guessing is probably not the country music star. My players aren't used to exploration and social focused games. How should I approach them during a session 0 to get them in the mood?
You gotta approach them quiet like.
Roll your
Sneak
stealth.
attack.
Yeah, don't scare them off.
Ask them. Like start with like that's the best way. Ask like, do you have any interest in playing this type of game? If they emphatically and universally say no, you're probably not going to have a lot of success with that
I
game.
just want to hit it with my axe. If they say that as the reply, and then be like, maybe this isn't a good place to start.
They all start grunting and growling at you.
I mean, we know players that want to, as they say, roll funny shaped dice and kill shit, and that's fine. But if, as you said, Dave, if you ask them, hey, what are you interested in? Or, I would like to go in this direction out of game. How do you feel about that? As with many things, having a conversation is going to give you the most honest and direct answer. And if they're like, well, maybe we'll give it a try, okay, well, then you can shut it. If they emphatically say, oh, absolutely, we've been waiting for that, well, then you know that they're on board.
Or if you have a specific game in mind, like you'd be like, oh, I want to run an urban campaign, and there's going to be a lot of political intrigue and social interaction. You'll be exploring the city, maybe beneath the city a bit. Are you interested in playing that game? And if they're like, well, will we get to fight monsters? And then from there you figure out if they're going to fight monsters or not. And you can talk this out and see what they're interested. Also, hey guy, thanks for stopping by. Also an awesome channel for you guys to check out, How to Be a Great Game Master. Has great advice. He's also an amazing DM. So basically it's just talking with your players and communicating, and finding out what they have an interest in. Or also too, you could ask them, what does exploration mean to you in the game? What does social interaction mean to you in the game? So this way you want to make sure you're on the same page. Even if they say yes, you want to make sure they're saying yes to the question you asked.
Yeah, I'd give them a few examples of what you're talking about, like exploration. Well, that can be in a dungeon, or it can be in the forest, or in a cityscape, and give them a little bit of examples so they know what to go on. Because there's plenty of examples on how combat's going to run for the most part in the book. So.
Yeah, and it's easy to find combat encounters out there that you could use as well for examples. But with role playing, social interaction, exploration, it might not. There's people that are using the exploration pillar and they don't know they're using it. Mm-hmm. All right, they just never thought about it, what it is, but it's in all their games.
Yeah, if you're doing a hex crawl and you're dealing with a lot of environmental stuff and exploring new terrains, you might already be heavily invested in that exploration pillar and not even realizing it. You just, as I said, you want to make sure that you and the players are on the same page with all the information.
Yeah, and also in the chat, Fragginator, Sean Donkery is amazing too, and he's talking about Guy from our last session. Sean Donkery. Just let that settle in, guys. If you're not watching Saber Dice Caro Stones, you might want to check that out.
Guy is the current GM on Saber Dice, right?
He is, yes.
Does he have a catchy DM name like everybody else did?
His is more offensive than anything.
Is it?
And he's the one that's supplied. I don't know why. I feel bad, but Fat Goblin is, I believe, what he's going with. Each to their own.
Well, maybe he was tired of seeing the skinny goblins getting all the
love
over here on Nerdarchy.
Maybe that's a compliment to goblins because they don't have a lot of food. So a fat goblin's like, oh, he must be doing really.
It's like
well.
an elite goblin.
Well, that makes me think of Storm King's Thunder and the Hill Giant.
Yeah.
Their perception of becoming the perfect hill giant or perfect giant is just to get as fat as they could. That is one of my favorite villains of all time. Wizards essentially made Fat Bastard from Austin Powers, but as a giant.
Get in my belly.
So there's a lot of discussion about bacon going on in the chat.
Well, Nate brought up squirrel bacon, so
Yes. So there's bacon made from squirrels. That'd be nuts. Squirrel bacon with maple, that kind of thing. People are curious about it.
The debate is raging whether squirrel bacon should be flavored with maple or hazelnut.
Oh,
Nutella. Just slather Nutella on
Nutella coated squirrel bacon.
Yeah. But yeah, so I've been kind of glancing at the chat from time to time. Have people weighed in on their favorite pillar
actually,
of the game?
Most people say, a lot of people conflate role playing and social. I'm gonna say just ad hoc. I would say most people seem to like the social and combat in the chat, or they want to know how to not be so much combat because their players just like combat.
Yeah, so I guess I think there's a difference between role playing and the social interaction pillar for sure. You
The whole
know,
thing's
the whole thing, yeah, that's it. Like the whole thing is role playing. It's a role playing game. When when you're in combat, you can be role playing and role playing with the other players. So social interaction's a little bit more specific in my mind, and that is when you specifically interact with NPCs, and the GM can even set up and kind of structure your social encounters the same way you would a combat encounter. The only difference is you're going to be talking things out and discussing things, and then more so than fighting with them. And it may or may not involve social interaction skills, depending on how your table runs things.
That's true. And if you are looking to try and get more role playing, more talking into the game, having your NPCs in combat, your monsters actually doing, quips and insults and whatnot, and having engagement there, that is a good way to actually test out what the players are interested and willing to do. Because if they're focused on the combat and you start having dialogue there, then maybe they'll start responding, and they might like that more. They might like to see more of that happen, more engagement, elsewhere.
You could actually get them to be more involved in social by having the monsters do that and kind of talk to the players, use their names and things like that.
Right.
So maybe they'll.
Yeah, and that's a good example. I consider that role playing, not necessarily a social interaction, but it is a way, baby steps, right? It's a way to get there. Or if you stop in the middle of a fight for a parlay, or there's a parlay before the fight breaks out, or the resolution of the fight being a parlay, these are all ways that you can lead from one type of encounter into another. Players are getting beaten really bad and they can't possibly win. Maybe the monsters offer them parlay, and now it's a social interaction, so it gives them another opportunity to maybe beat the monsters a different way, or at least survive.
Which has happened in our games.
I can just think about bacon right now.
Yeah, you're just stuck on bacon.
Yeah. So another thing about the whole thing with people finding combat easier to deal with, and the social and the exploration not so much, is the combat's pretty clear cut. We know what winning a combat is. We know what you need to roll. There's rules, and that's all kind of mapped out for you. So when you're new to a game, it's easier to just hop into something where it's kind of more linear and all kind of figured out for the most part. So the more you help the players as the GM, or help your other players if you're a fellow player, figure out that what social encounters look like and what exploration looks like, or what you can expect out of it, the more, I guess, the less scary or unknown it becomes, and the easier it is to hop into those.
Yeah, and you can kind of graduate them as well, where you design your exploration and your social encounters to make them more linear initially, and then you can get more complex later on. A good example for social would be if you're trying to get something out of the person, and you really only have one goal, and there's only one way to kind of achieve it. I think that would be an example of a linear social encounter.
Yeah, getting past the guard when people are around, so you need to convince the guard to let you by, not kill the guard and stuff him in the closet or something.
The night on the bridge, right? You may not pass, and maybe you get there as he's fighting what you would consider unsurmountable odds, and he easily dispatches it. So you've kind of been given this idea that, oh, well, he's not a pushover, and I don't think I could have beat what he just beat, so I don't think I can beat him. Now you have to talk to them and figure out how to get there, right? This is a clear-cut social interaction in the sense that your objective is to cross the bridge and to do it without fighting him or her, as the case may be. So it starts setting the dynamic up for the players. But later on, it could be more complex. Like in a political intrigue game where there's a lot of stuff going on, you may come away from an encounter really not knowing if you won or not, or you got what you needed, or if you gave them what they needed. Mm-hmm. As things progress, for exploration, there's a ravine. Did you get to the other side or not? It's pretty simple.
Is it?
Well, it depends whether you got there or not. The objective is simple anyway.
And you can up the complexity as your players get used to the amount of choices they have to make within the exploration or the social encounter.
Yeah, Mike Morrell's did a thing. I don't know if it was on Twitter, if it was on his Happy Fun Hour, where he almost made hazards like monsters. in order to you'd have to like overcome them.
With the spider whip.
Yeah, with the spiders, yes. So like that's a good example of an exploration where it kind of like pulls in elements of combat, but it's still not really combat. You know, the risks are very similar as combat because you're going to take damage, you're going to get you have to go through difficult terrain, but it's still more of a hazard. So I consider that more like exploration.
Hellscapes does that too with the actual hellscapes. There's like, it might be like a blizzard or something, but it's like an awful one. They actually give it like a CR, so it kind of gives you guides on like how much damage it would do, how long it lasts.
Yeah, I feel like cinematic environments use a lot of those things as well. So they're all great things to check out. And here's the thing, too. If you can see something adapted into an exploration pillar, you may then be able to take that and turn it into also a social. Especially if you want to be more skill challenge heavy and use the skills more so than just letting your players have free range with role playing and doing it that way.
Any giveaways or anything?
We do have to mention
in the description there was a couple giveaways going on.
We have the Gleam contest for the Easy Roller dice. We have the contest for the Minotaur.
Yes, pace setters as well as Vallejo Paints has giving us paints and minis, both painted and unpainted, to give away. You can see the details in the description. We have both of those contests going on.
And then the Invisible Sun, we have one more black cube to give away. It's over there, ready to go,
ready to be shipped,
and that's gonna be picked next week. It was a bit pricey to ship. 28 plus pounds shipped across the states. And Sean should have it by now. Should have arrived Wednesday.
Oh, nice, sweet.
Somebody had asked earlier about if they asked the chat if they had any Halloween adventures. You want to tease your Halloween?
Well, Wednesday is Halloween, and it is rumored that Nerdarchy puts up a video every Wednesday. That might be a place to look for sure. With that, though, I think we are at that time.
Well, the Invisible Sun, if you want to get in on that, you can either quickly, fill out the form and mail it into our P.O. box over on the website, or you can just sign up for our Patreon, and we will announce the winner next week. But you've got from now till next Saturday
to get in on the action. So with that, until next time,
stay nerdy.